My name is Daniel Morgan, and until 3 years ago, I believed I was living the American dream. Our five-bedroom colonial in the prestigious North Shore suburbs of Chicago stood as a testament to 15 years of hard work and what I thought was a solid marriage. Nestled on Maple Avenue, with its manicured lawns and century-old oak trees, our house was the envy of friends and family alike. The moment we first walked through that grand entryway with its sweeping staircase, Rachel squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is it, Dan. This is our forever home." I'm a financial advisor with Morgan Wealth Strategies, a practice I built from nothing after graduating with honors from Northwestern School of Business. Starting with just a handful of clients I'd met through networking events, I slowly built a reputation for honest, careful financial planning. Now, 15 years later, I manage portfolios worth over $250 million for high net worth clients across the Midwest. My office downtown overlooks Millennium Park, and I've been featured in Chicago Business Magazine as one of the city's 40 under 40 financial professionals to watch. The work wasn't easy, especially in the early years. I'd leave home at 6 a.m. to beat the traffic on the Kennedy Expressway, often returning well after 8 p.m. Weekends were frequently interrupted by client emergencies or market fluctuations that required immediate attention. But I never complained. Every late night, every missed dinner, every canceled vacation was an investment in what I thought was our shared future. Rachel Elizabeth Morgan, née Caldwell, was the woman I believed would be by my side forever. We met during senior year at Northwestern, at a fraternity philanthropy event where she was representing her sorority. She stood out immediately, not just for her physical beauty with her auburn hair and bright green eyes, but for her confidence and sharp wit. While other girls giggled nervously during the charity auction, Rachel commandeered the microphone and doubled the donations through sheer force of personality. "That's quite a talent you have there," I told her afterward at the reception. She smiled, taking a sip of her punch. "What talent is that?" "Getting people to happily give away their money," I replied. "Funny, that's exactly what financial advisors do, isn't it?" She countered, and I knew I'd met my match. Rachel was studying communications with a specialization in public relations. Even as an undergraduate, she interned at prestigious firms and built an impressive portfolio. After graduation, while I was struggling to build my client base, she quickly secured a position at Prescott and Bailey, one of Chicago's premier PR firms that we dated for 2 years after college, living in separate apartments downtown while establishing our careers. Our courtship was filled with romantic dinners at Chicago's finest restaurants, weekend trips to Door County, and ambitious plans for our future. I proposed on the observation deck of the Willis Tower, with the entire city sparkling below us. Like the diamond I slipped onto her finger. "Daniel Morgan," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I can't wait to build an amazing life with you." Our wedding at the Chicago Botanic Garden was featured in Modern Bride magazine. Rachel's connections in PR securing us the spotlight. 300 guests watched as we exchanged vows under a canopy of white roses. Her father, a retired airline executive, spared no expense. "My little girl only gets married once," he announced during his toast, unaware of the irony those words would hold years later that we purchased our house on Maple Avenue after 5 years of marriage, when both our careers had solidified. Rachel had risen to senior account executive at Prescott and Bailey, handling crisis management for some of Chicago's most prominent businesses and personalities. Our combined income allowed us a lifestyle of considerable comfort. European vacations every summer, a cabin in Wisconsin for weekend getaways, his and hers luxury vehicles in the garage. Early in our marriage, we had the children conversation. Rachel was clear. Her career was just taking off, and she wasn't ready to put it on hold. "Maybe in a few years," she'd say whenever the subject arose. As time passed, a few years became "not now," and eventually, "I don't think that's in the cards for us, Dan." I had always pictured myself as a father, but I loved Rachel enough to accept her decision. Instead, we channeled our energies into our careers and our social life. Our social circle consisted primarily of other professional couples, lawyers, doctors, executives, most of whom we'd met through business connections or our country club membership at Lakeshore Golf and Country Club. Rachel and I became known for our dinner parties, where she would showcase her culinary skills learned from exclusive cooking classes, while I paired each course with wines from our extensive cellar. To the perfect hosts, our friends would toast, raising glasses of expensive Cabernet as Rachel beamed with pride. For 15 years, I believed we were that perfect couple, successful, attractive, envied. I trusted Rachel completely, never questioning her late nights at the office or business trips that seemed to multiply as years went by. When she suggested separate vacations occasionally to maintain our independence, I agreed, believing this was simply part of a modern, progressive marriage. Trust is the foundation of any successful relationship, Rachel would often say, usually just before announcing another weekend conference or client retreat. Little did I know that the foundation of our marriage had been compromised long before I noticed the first crack in our perfect facade. The first hint that something was amiss came 3 years ago, during what should have been a celebration. My wealth management firm had just crossed the $200 million mark in assets under management, and I'd invited Rachel to join me and my team for drinks at Gibson Steakhouse. When she called to cancel at the last minute, claiming a client emergency, I was disappointed but understanding. Don't worry about it, I told her. These things happen. We'll celebrate this weekend instead. That night, returning home earlier than expected, I found our house dark and empty. Rachel's voicemail indicated she was still handling her emergency, but her assistant had earlier mentioned that all scheduled client meetings had concluded by 5 p.m. It was a small inconsistency, easily dismissed at the time. I poured myself a scotch and fell asleep watching a Cubs game, pushing away the faint unease settling in my stomach. The changes in Rachel were subtle at first, so subtle that for months I questioned whether I was imagining things. She became increasingly protective of her phone, installing a new password and angling the screen away whenever I entered the room. Our shared laptop, which had always been open to both of us, suddenly acquired a separate user account with password protection. It's just client confidentiality, she explained when I asked about it. The firm's instituting new privacy protocols. Rachel's wardrobe began to change as well. New lingerie appeared in her drawer, items I never saw her wear. Her casual business attire gave way to more provocative outfits, with higher hemlines and deeper necklines. Her trips to the salon became more frequent, and she began visiting a gym with a personal trainer 3 times a week. Just taking better care of myself, she'd say when I commented on these changes. Turning 40 next year is making me more conscious of my appearance. Our physical relationship, once passionate and frequent, dwindled to occasional, perfunctory encounters. Rachel always had a reason: stress from work, migraines that mysteriously appeared at bedtime, early meetings the next day. When we did make love, it felt mechanical, as though she were performing a duty rather than sharing intimacy. One evening, after another rejected advance, I tried to discuss the change in our relationship. Are you happy, Rachel? I asked, watching her apply expensive night cream at her vanity. She barely glanced at me in the mirror. Of course I'm happy. Just busy. Peterson Electronics is launching a new product line, and the publicity campaign is consuming all my energy. Peterson? I asked. I don't remember you mentioning that client before. A momentary flash of something, alarm? Annoyance? Crossed her face before her professional mask returned. It's a new account. Very demanding. Robert Peterson is a perfectionist. That was the first time I heard his name. Casually dropped into conversation, yet delivered with an inflection that, in retrospect, should have alerted me immediately. The mysterious late nights multiplied. Rachel began attending client dinners that would stretch until midnight or later. Twice a month became weekly, then twice weekly. She would return home with flushed cheeks and disheveled hair, explaining it away as too many cocktails or the restaurant was so warm. The scent of unfamiliar cologne clung to her clothes and hair, a distinctive, expensive fragrance I later identified as Clive Christian's #1 for men, retailing at nearly $1,000 per bottle. When I mentioned the scent once, she laughed it off. That's probably Jerome, the new creative director. He practically bathes in the stuff. Our joint credit card statements began showing charges that raised questions. Dinners at intimate restaurants downtown on nights she claimed to be working late at the office. Uber rides to addresses in neighborhoods with no connection to her. Firm's clients, charges from high-end hotel bars when no out-of-town business trips were scheduled. Oh, I took clients for drinks after our meeting, she would explain, or the entire team went for dinner after the presentation ran late. Each explanation seemed plausible in isolation, but collectively, they formed a pattern that became increasingly difficult to ignore. Then came the jewelry. A delicate gold bracelet appeared on her wrist, something I hadn't given her. When I asked about it, she claimed it was a gift from the team after the Peterson campaign won an industry award. Later, I noticed a pair of diamond earrings I didn't recognize. These old things. I've had them forever, she said dismissively when I inquired. One morning, I noticed her wedding ring sitting on the bathroom counter. In 15 years of marriage, I had never seen her remove it. Not for showers, not for sleep, not for anything. When I mentioned it casually over breakfast, she seemed momentarily flustered. Oh, my fingers were swelling yesterday. Probably too much sodium in that takeout. We had. And I've developed a slight skin irritation under the band. It's nothing to worry about. But the ring remained on the counter for 3 days before returning to her finger, and I noticed she now removed it regularly, especially before her late meetings. Perhaps the most telling sign was the change in how she spoke about our future. Where once we discussed retirement plans, travel dreams, and even which European city we might purchase a vacation apartment in, Rachel began speaking in terms of I rather than we. I'm thinking of taking a sabbatical next year, she mentioned casually over dinner one night. That sounds great, I replied. Where should we go? I could probably arrange to work remotely for a few months. She avoided my eyes. Actually, I was thinking of doing some solo travel, self-discovery, and all that. Women at my age need to reconnect with themselves. That night, I lay awake beside her sleeping form, listening to her occasionally murmur unintelligible words into her pillow, and felt the distance between us had grown immeasurable. As a financial advisor, I've counseled clients through major life transitions, retirement, inheritance, divorce. I've learned to recognize the signs of impending financial distress long before they become obvious. Now, I was seeing all the indicators of a marriage in crisis, but continued to hope I was misreading the signals. The final confirmation that something was seriously wrong came on our 15th anniversary. I had arranged a surprise weekend at the Peninsula Hotel downtown, the same place we'd spent our wedding night. When I told Rachel about the reservation over our anniversary dinner at Alinea, her face registered not delight but panic. This weekend? Oh, Dan, I can't. The Peterson account has an emergency situation, a potential media crisis. I need to be available. Can't someone else handle it? It's our anniversary, Rachel. You don't understand, she said, her voice taking on an edge I rarely heard. Robert specifically requested me. I can't let him down. Robert, I repeated. You mean Mr. Peterson? Yes, of course, she said quickly. Mr. Peterson, the client. I canceled the Peninsula reservation the next morning, and that night, I noticed Rachel's overnight bag missing from our closet. She had texted that she would be working late at the office, but when I called Prescott and Bailey's main line at 10 p.m., the security guard informed me that the office had been closed since 7 that night. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Observations. I began recording every inconsistency, every unexplained absence, every suspicious charge. A part of me hoped I would review this document someday and laugh at my paranoia. Another part, the part that had built a successful business on careful analysis and pattern recognition, knew better. The uncertainty was destroying me from the inside. I lost weight, struggled to concentrate at work, and found myself staring at the ceiling most nights while Rachel slept soundly beside me. Or claimed late night work emergencies that kept her away until dawn. After 3 months of cataloging inconsistencies and suspicious behaviors, I knew I needed either confirmation or peace of mind. That I considered confronting Rachel directly, but feared that without evidence, she would dismiss my concerns as paranoia or insecurity. More selfishly, perhaps, I wasn't ready to hear her admit to anything that would shatter our marriage beyond repair. The decision to hire a private investigator wasn't made lightly. It felt like a violation of trust. Ironic, given my suspicions, but I needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. Through professional connections, I was introduced to Michael Donovan, a former FBI agent who had opened his own investigation firm after 20 years with the Bureau. That we met at an inconspicuous coffee shop in Evanston, far from my office and our social circles. Mike was not what I expected, no trench coat or world-weary expression. Instead, he was a fit, middle-aged man in a polo shirt and khakis who could have been any suburban dad. Most of my work is exactly what you're describing, he told me after I'd awkwardly explained my situation. Corporate espionage and marital investigations make up about 80% of my business. And the other 20%? I asked, trying to delay the uncomfortable details of my own case. Background checks, missing persons, occasional fraud investigations. He sipped his black coffee. But we're here about your wife, Mr. Morgan. I handed him the folder I'd prepared, a copy of my observations document, Rachel's work schedule, photographs, our credit card statements with suspicious charges highlighted, and a list of dates when her behavior had seemed particularly unusual. This is actually quite helpful, Mike said, reviewing my materials. Most clients come to me with just a hunch. You've done some of the preliminary work already. Occupational hazard, I explained. I analyze data for a living. What exactly are you hoping to discover, Mr. Morgan? Mike asked, his eyes studying me carefully. The question caught me off guard. What was I hoping for? Confirmation of my worst fears, or reassurance that I was wrong? The truth, I finally answered. Whatever it is. Mike nodded. Standard surveillance. Package is 2 weeks. That usually gives us enough time to establish patterns and gather evidence, if there is any. I'll need a $5,000 retainer to start. I wrote the check without hesitation, mentally categorizing it as an investment in my future, one way or another. Mike's surveillance began the following Monday. Each evening, he would send me brief, encrypted updates that revealed little but confirmed the investigation was active. Subject left office at 6:30 p.m., returned home at 7:15 p.m. Subject attended lunch meeting at Gibson's with 3 colleagues, returned to office at 2:10 p.m. The normality of these reports began to make me feel foolish. Perhaps Rachel's behavior had perfectly innocent explanations. Perhaps the changes I noticed were simply the natural evolution of a long-term marriage, combined with the pressures of 2 demanding careers. Then, on day 9 of the surveillance, the tone of Mike's reports changed. Need to meet in person. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., same location. I barely slept that night. Rachel was home, having returned from a client dinner around 11 p.m. She showered before coming to bed, something she'd begun doing regularly after late nights, and fell asleep almost immediately, turned away from my side of the bed. Mike was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop the next morning, a thick manila envelope on the table between us. I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, he said without preamble, but you were right to be suspicious. He opened the envelope and began laying out photographs, cell phone records, and a detailed timeline of events. The evidence was irrefutable. Rachel had been meeting Robert Peterson, a senior partner at Peterson, Goldsmith & Wexler, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, 3 times a week for the past 6 months, possibly longer. The photographs showed them entering and exiting the Four Seasons Hotel downtown, holding hands in a secluded corner of Piccolo Sogno restaurant, kissing in his Audi R8 in the parking garage beneath her office building. Cell phone records revealed hundreds of text messages exchanged at all hours, including many sent from our bed while I slept beside her. He's married, Mike informed me, showing me a photograph of Robert with his wife and 2 young children. Janine Peterson, age 37. They have 2 children, Timothy, 10, and Sophia, 8. They live in Winnetka. Mrs. Peterson comes from the Caldwell family. Yes, those Caldwells, the banking fortune. Very prominent in Chicago society, major donors to conservative political causes and the Episcopal Church. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rachel's lover was married to a woman with the same maiden name as hers. The affair appears to be extensive and ongoing. Mike continued, his voice professional but kind. They've taken weekend trips together to Michigan and Wisconsin, booking adjoining rooms under business pretenses but utilizing only one. They've established regular meeting places, primarily the Four Seasons, occasionally the Peninsula. They exchange gifts regularly. He showed me receipts for items I recognized. The bracelet, the earrings, a silk scarf I'd thought was from her company's holiday exchange. Robert Peterson had excellent taste and seemingly unlimited resources to lavish on my wife. There's more, Mike said, hesitating for the first time. Audio surveillance from their most recent encounter suggests this isn't a purely physical relationship. They've discussed a future together, though in vague terms. Peterson seems reluctant to leave his wife, citing potential financial consequences and concern for his children. And Rachel? I managed to ask, my mouth dry despite the coffee I'd been drinking. Mike's expression was sympathetic. She appears to be pushing for a more definitive commitment. In one conversation, she mentioned feeling guilty about, quote, living a double life, but also expressed frustration that you, quote, never notice anything beyond your spreadsheets. The pain of those words was sharp and immediate. Had I truly been so blind, so absorbed in my work that I'd failed to see my marriage disintegrating? Or was this simply the justification cheaters always provide, blaming their betrayed partners for their own moral failures? Would you like to hear the recordings? Mike asked gently. I shook my head. The photographs and timeline were damning enough. I couldn't bear to hear Rachel's voice speaking intimately to another man. What happens now is entirely up to you, Mike said, gathering the materials and returning them to the envelope. Some clients choose immediate confrontation. Others prefer to gather more evidence, particularly if they're considering legal action. Some decide to work on their marriages despite the infidelity. And what do most people do? I asked, needing some guidance in this unfamiliar territory. Most people act emotionally and regret it later, he said frankly. The ones who fare best. Take time to process the information and develop a plan before making any moves. He handed me the envelope. All the evidence is yours. I'll send my final report and invoice tomorrow. The photos and audio are also on this encrypted flash drive. He placed a small black device on the table. The password is your date of birth, as you provided in your intake form. I stared at the envelope and flash drive, physical manifestations of the end of 15 years of marriage, the destruction of what I'd thought was my life's greatest success. One more thing, Mike said as he prepared to leave. Speaking not as an investigator, but as someone who's seen hundreds of these cases and been through a divorce myself, don't blame yourself. Affairs are choices, not accidents. After Mike left, I sat alone in the coffee shop for nearly 2 hours, unable to move, unable to think clearly. Eventually, I drove to Lake Michigan and walked along the shore, the envelope locked in my car's glove compartment. The November wind was bitter, cutting through my coat, but I barely noticed. The cold outside was nothing compared to the ice forming around my heart. That night, Rachel called to say she would be working late again. I heard the lie in every syllable, pictured her in Robert Peterson's arms even as she claimed to be finalizing a press release. Take your time, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Some things can't be rushed. She paused, perhaps sensing something different in my tone, but then quickly continued the charade. Thanks for understanding, Dan. Don't wait up. After hanging up, I poured myself 3 fingers of Macallan 18, a bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat in our darkened living room. I opened the envelope again, spreading the photos across our imported Italian coffee table. Rachel's face, animated with joy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Rachel's hands, caressing another man's face. Rachel's body, pressed against a stranger who wasn't a stranger to her. The pain was physical, a crushing pressure in my chest that made breathing difficult. But beneath the pain, something else was forming, a cold, clarifying anger that brought with it unexpected focus. I gathered the photos methodically, returned them to the envelope, and made my first decision. I would not confront Rachel immediately. Confrontation would bring only denials or tearful confessions, neither of which would benefit me now. Instead, I would follow Mike's implicit advice. I would develop a plan. As a financial advisor, I counseled clients daily on protecting their assets and securing their futures. Now, I would need to apply that same strategic thinking to the ruins of my personal life. If Rachel and Robert had been methodically deceiving me for months, I could be equally methodical in my response. I took out a fresh notepad, not digital, nothing that could be discovered, and began outlining my approach. By the time Rachel returned home at 2 a.m., slipping quietly into our guest bedroom to avoid waking me, I had the first draft of what would become my roadmap to recovery. The next morning, I left for work before Rachel awoke. I called my office to clear my schedule for the day, citing a family emergency. Then I drove to the lakefront again, parked near the museum campus, and made the first of many calls that would set my plan in motion at that moment. Standing by the lake with evidence of my wife's betrayal in my briefcase and the first elements of my response in motion, I made a silent promise to myself. This would not destroy me. Instead, I would emerge stronger, wiser, and ultimately victorious. What I didn't yet realize was how complete that victory would be. The ancient Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu wrote, "Every battle is won before it is fought." In the weeks following my discovery of Rachel's affair, those words became my mantra. I would not rush into emotional confrontation. Instead, I would prepare so thoroughly that by the time Rachel realized we were at war, the outcome would already be determined. My preparation began with securing the best legal representation available. Through business connections, I discreetly contacted the top 5 divorce attorneys in Chicago, scheduling initial consultations under the guise of estate planning for a client. This strategy, often called conflicting out, would prevent Rachel from hiring any of these premium legal minds once proceedings began, as they would have a conflict of interest having spoken with me. Carolyn Berger of Berger, Hockman and Associates impressed me most with her combination of strategic thinking and ruthless efficiency. When I revealed the true purpose of our meeting during our consultation, showing her selected photos from Mike's investigation, she didn't flinch. "Illinois is a no-fault divorce state," she explained, "but evidence of infidelity can still influence property division and maintenance awards, particularly if marital assets were used to finance the affair." They were, I confirmed, showing her the credit card statements I'd compiled. "Excellent record keeping," she commented, examining my documentation. "Most clients come to me with nothing but suspicions and emotions. I prefer data," I replied. "As do judges," she noted with approval. "What is your primary objective in this divorce? Financial security? Punitive damages? Expedience?" I considered the question carefully. "I want to emerge with my assets and dignity intact, and I want them to regret their choices." Carolyn nodded. "Then let's make sure they do." I retained her services with a $25,000 retainer transferred from my personal accounts rather than our joint funds. Together, we developed a comprehensive strategy for the divorce proceedings, with careful attention to timing and evidence preservation. Simultaneously, I began methodically securing my financial position. As a financial advisor, I had structured our assets carefully throughout our marriage, but I now scrutinized every account, investment, and property with new eyes. The eyes of a man preparing for battle. First, I documented all our marital assets. The house, valued at $1.2 million with $400,000 remaining on the mortgage. Investment accounts, approximately $1.8 million. Retirement accounts, my 401k valued at $950,000. Rachel's at $680,000. Art collection, appraised at $230,000. Vehicles and various smaller assets that I created a detailed inventory of all personal property with photographs, paying particular attention to items with sentimental or significant financial value. I videotaped our home room by room, narrating the provenance of furniture, art, and collectibles. This would prove invaluable when it came time to divide property. For accounts in my name only, I changed passwords and security questions, selecting new answers Rachel wouldn't know. I opened new accounts at a different bank, gradually transferring reasonable amounts of my personal income there. Nothing that could be construed as hiding assets, but enough to ensure I would have operating funds when needed. I reviewed all our insurance policies, home, auto, health, life, making copies of documents and noting beneficiary designations. I called our estate attorney to obtain copies of our wills and living trusts, ostensibly for regular review. Perhaps most importantly, I began tracking Rachel's patterns with calculated precision. I noted when she was genuinely working versus meeting Robert, which credit cards she used for affair-related expenses, which friends knew about or facilitated her deception. I documented every lie, every unexplained absence, every suspicious transaction. All of this I did while maintaining a perfect facade of normalcy. I continued our regular routines, weekend brunches, dinner with friends, even planning a spring vacation to Santorini that I knew would never happen. I listened attentively to Rachel's stories about work, nodding sympathetically when she complained about difficult clients on days I knew she'd been with Robert. You work too hard, I would say, watching her eyes for signs of guilt. You should. Take a day off. Maybe you're right, she'd reply, and I'd know she was already planning her next rendezvous. The performance was exhausting but necessary. Any change in my behavior might alert Rachel that something was amiss, and I couldn't risk her preparing her own defenses before I was ready. While securing my financial and legal position was straightforward, understanding Robert Peterson required more creative approaches. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with, his vulnerabilities, his pressure points, his weaknesses. Through business contacts, I arranged a meeting with a former client who had worked at Peterson's law firm years earlier. Over drinks at an obscure bar in Wicker Park, far from our usual haunts, I casually mentioned Peterson's name. Robert? Sure, I remember him, my contact said. Brilliant attorney, but ruthless. Typical silver spoon background, Exeter, Princeton, Northwestern law. His father was a federal judge, got him his first position at the firm. And personally, I probed, keeping my tone casually interested. Let's just say his professional ethics don't extend to his personal life. There were rumors about him and a paralegal when I was there. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. He sipped his whiskey. His wife comes from serious money, old Chicago banking family. Word is, their marriage agreement has a strict fidelity clause. He strays, he walks away with nothing. This information was gold. Further discreet inquiries confirmed that Robert was indeed on track for partnership at his prestigious firm, with a vote scheduled for the coming spring. The partnership would nearly triple his income and secure his professional standing in Chicago's legal community. That I also learned that his wife, Janine, was heavily involved in charitable work through her family's foundation, focusing primarily on youth programs through their church. Their children attended St. Mark's Episcopal Academy, an exclusive private school where Janine served on the board of trustees. The Peterson family projected an image of perfect propriety, regular church attendance, children in competitive sports leagues, summer homes in the right locations, memberships in the right clubs. Robert's affair with Rachel threatened every aspect of that carefully constructed facade. With this knowledge, I began the most delicate phase of my preparation, gathering intelligence on Robert and Rachel's relationship patterns. I purchased a sophisticated GPS tracker and, during one of Rachel's overnight conferences, placed it under her car. This allowed me to confirm the hotels they frequented, the restaurants where they dined, their regular meeting schedule. I hired Mike for additional surveillance, this time focusing on Robert. The resulting intelligence was revealing. He and Rachel were indeed discussing a future together, but Robert was stalling, unwilling to commit to leaving his wife, but promising Rachel that the timing will be right after partnership votes. Most damning was an audio recording from a dinner at a small French restaurant in Lincoln Park. Rachel, clearly frustrated by Robert's hesitancy, had asked directly, "What about Daniel? Don't you think he deserves to know?" Robert's response chilled. "Me? Daniel is irrelevant. He's so absorbed in his work, he wouldn't notice if you were having an affair with his brother. We just need to be patient." Rachel had laughed, actually laughed, at this assessment of my obliviousness. "You're right. Sometimes I think I could leave a hotel receipt on his pillow, and he'd just ask if it was tax-deductible." Their casual dismissal of me, their assumption of my continued ignorance, crystallized my resolve. This wasn't simply about a betrayal of vows. This was about calculated deception, ongoing humiliation, and a fundamental lack of respect. The final element of my preparation involved our social circle. Carefully, without raising suspicions, I strengthened connections with our mutual friends, particularly those Rachel had been distancing herself from as her affair progressed. I hosted client events and invited couples we'd known for years, making myself more visible and engaged while Rachel made excuses to miss these gatherings. "Rachel's working late again," our friend Melissa asked during one dinner party. "That's the third time this month she's missed game night." "You know Rachel," I replied with a practiced smile, always dedicated to her clients. I also cultivated new relationships with people strategically positioned in Chicago's business and social communities, individuals whose opinion might matter when the truth eventually emerged. I joined the board of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's Young Patrons Committee, volunteered for a prominent literacy nonprofit, and increased my visibility at industry events. These connections would prove invaluable when the time came to control the narrative of our divorce. By the time 3 months had passed since my discovery of the affair, my preparation was nearly complete. I had secured top-tier legal representation and developed a comprehensive legal strategy, documented all marital assets, and secured copies of all important financial and legal documents, gathered extensive evidence of Rachel's infidelity, including photographs, audio recordings, and financial records, researched Robert Peterson's vulnerabilities, his pending partnership, his prenuptial agreement, his carefully maintained public image, strengthened my social and professional networks while documenting Rachel's increasing absence from our shared social life, maintained a convincing appearance of normalcy, giving no indication of my knowledge or intentions. The final piece fell into place when Rachel mentioned the upcoming annual charity gala hosted by her PR firm, an event she had been working on for months. The gala, benefiting children's literacy programs, was the highlight of the spring social season, attended by all of Prescott and Bailey's major clients and numerous Chicago celebrities and business leaders. Robert's firm is a major sponsor this year, Rachel mentioned casually over dinner. He's bringing his wife and children for the presentation. That's wonderful, I replied, already calculating the potential of this information. It sounds like it will be quite an event. It will be, she agreed, eyes bright with excitement that I now recognized had nothing to do with professional pride and everything to do with spending an evening in Robert's presence, even if they had to maintain a charade of professional distance that night. As Rachel slept beside me, one of the increasingly rare nights she spent at home, I finalized my plan. The charity gala would provide the perfect stage for the first act of my carefully orchestrated revenge. 3 months of meticulous preparation, of swallowing pain and rage while planning every detail, had brought me to this point. The charity gala was 3 weeks away, and I had just enough time to ensure everything was in place for what would come next. As I lay in the dark, listening to the steady breathing of the woman who had betrayed me, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but it had been channeled into something more productive, a cold, focused determination that would carry me through what was to come. Sun Tzu also wrote, "To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself." Rachel and Robert had provided me with everything I needed. Now it was time to use it. The annual Prescott and Bailey Charity Gala was a cornerstone of Chicago's spring social season, held in the Crystal Ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton. Each year, the event attracted the city's business elite, raised substantial funds for children's literacy programs, and generated significant media coverage, both in traditional outlets and across social media platforms. This year, the gala had special significance for Rachel. As the newly appointed lead of the firm's nonprofit division, she had been tasked with overseeing every aspect of the event. For months, she had worked late nights and weekends to secure sponsors, coordinate with vendors, and ensure that every detail was perfect. What she didn't know was that I had been making my own preparations, timed precisely to coincide with her moment of professional triumph. 3 days before the gala, I put the first phase of my plan into action. Using the information gathered through Mike's investigation, I assembled a comprehensive dossier on Rachel and Robert's affair. The package included selected photographs showing them entering and exiting hotels together, screenshots of text messages with explicit content, copies of hotel receipts paid with Rachel's credit card, and a timeline documenting their meetings over the previous 6 months. I had debated including the audio recordings, but ultimately decided against it. The photographs and documents were damning enough without forcing Janine Peterson to hear her husband's voice professing love to another woman. The package was delivered by courier to Janine Peterson's private office at the Caldwell Family Foundation, marked personal and confidential. I included a brief and signed note. "Mrs. Peterson, I believe you deserve to know the truth about your husband's relationship with Rachel Morgan. The enclosed evidence speaks for itself. You might find the upcoming Prescott and Bailey Charity Gala particularly illuminating. A concerned friend. Was it cruel to inform an innocent woman of her husband's betrayal in such a manner? Perhaps, but I had come to believe that Janine Peterson, like myself, deserved to know the truth about the person She had married. The timing of the revelation was calculated, yes, but the information itself was something she had a right to possess. That I had considered sending similar packages to Rachel's boss and colleagues, but decided against it. A scorched earth approach might satisfy my desire for immediate revenge, but could potentially backfire, making Rachel appear the victim of a vindictive husband. Instead, I would let events unfold naturally, with only a gentle nudge in the right direction. The night of the gala arrived, a mild spring evening perfect for the black tie affair. Rachel had left early to oversee final preparations, dressed in a new gown I now recognized as having been selected to impress someone other than her husband. I arrived fashionably late, stopping to chat with acquaintances in the lobby while surreptitiously watching the entrance for the Petersons' arrival. The crystal ballroom was transformed for the occasion, with elegant floral arrangements and soft lighting creating an atmosphere of sophisticated charity. Nearly 400 of Chicago's business and social elite mingled, champagne flutes in hand, as waiters circulated with hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in one corner, and exhibition boards displayed the literacy projects funded by previous year's galas. Rachel was in her element, moving confidently among guests, accepting compliments on the event's execution. From across the room, I saw her approach Robert Peterson, who stood with his wife near the bar. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the careful maintenance of professional distance even as his eyes followed Rachel's movements. Janine Peterson was a striking woman, tall, blonde, aristocratic in bearing, wearing a conservative but elegant navy gown. She accepted Rachel's greeting with a rigid smile, her hand clutching her champagne flute with white-knuckled intensity. Whatever her plans for the evening, she was clearly struggling to maintain her composure, and I made my way slowly toward their group, stopping to exchange pleasantries with mutual acquaintances along the way. I wanted to be close enough to witness whatever was about to unfold without being directly involved. "Daniel." Rachel's voice held a note of surprise as I approached. "I didn't expect you so early." "I wouldn't miss this," I replied, kissing her cheek. "You've worked so hard on it." I turned to Robert, extending my hand. "Mr. Peterson, I believe Rachel speaks highly of your firm's contribution to tonight's event." Robert's handshake was firm, but his expression strained. "Mr. Morgan." "Yes, we're proud to support such a worthy cause." "And Mrs. Peterson," I continued, turning to Janine. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard wonderful things about the Caldwell Foundation's work." Janine Peterson's eyes met mine with an intensity that suggested she was trying to determine whether I was the source of the package she'd received. "Mr. Morgan." "Yes, we're quite committed to children's education. In fact, we believe strongly in the importance of integrity and honesty in all aspects of life." Her emphasis on the final words was subtle but unmistakable. Rachel shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Daniel, I should introduce you to the chairman of the Literacy Board. He's a potential client for your firm." "In a moment," I replied easily. "I'm enjoying meeting the Petersons." An awkward silence fell over our group, broken when a photographer approached, asking to take a picture of the event committee with major sponsors. Rachel and Robert were positioned side by side, with Janine and me flanking them. The forced proximity seemed to escalate the tension exponentially. After the photo, Janine placed her empty champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray and turned to her husband. "Robert, could I speak with you privately for a moment? About the children's summer plans." "Now?" he asked, a slight tremor in his voice. "Yes, now," she replied, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. As they moved away, I turned to Rachel. "Is everything all right?" Mrs. Peterson seemed rather tense. "I'm sure it's nothing," Rachel replied, but her eyes followed the couple with evident concern. What happened next unfolded with a dramatic precision I could never have orchestrated. From the corner of the ballroom came the sound of voices raised. In argument, Janine Peterson's cultured tones accelerating into something sharper and louder, cutting through the genteel murmur of the gala. "How dare you?" The words rang clear across the ballroom, causing conversations to halt and heads to turn. "How dare you stand there with her, pretending?" Robert's response was too low to hear, his hands raised in a placating gesture that seemed only to inflame his wife further. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down." Janine's voice carried effortlessly now, her finishing school elocution projecting each syllable with devastating clarity. I have photographs, Robert. Hotel receipts. Text. Messages. Did you think I wouldn't find out? The ballroom had fallen silent. Hundreds of Chicago's elite witnessing the implosion of the Petersons' marriage in real time. Rachel had gone perfectly still beside me, her face draining of color. I should, she began, taking a step toward the unfolding scene that I placed a gentle hand on her arm. I wouldn't, Rachel. This seems rather personal. Before she could respond, Janine Peterson's voice rose again. And you hypocrite, standing here accepting accolades while sleeping with another woman's husband. For a moment, it wasn't clear who she was addressing. Then Janine turned, her arm extended, finger pointing directly at Rachel across the crowded ballroom. Did you think I wouldn't know it was you? Rachel Morgan, the trusted PR executive. Were the client meetings and late-night strategy sessions worth it? Was destroying my children's family part of your professional strategy? Rachel's professional mask shattered completely. Janine, please, this isn't the place. Then where is the place? Janine demanded, advancing toward us as the crowd parted. Like the Red Sea. Your marital bed? The Four Seasons, room 718? That seems to be your preferred venue, according to these. She pulled several photographs from her clutch purse, casting them to the floor at Rachel's feet. The photographs, copies of those I had provided, scattered across the polished ballroom floor. Several nearby guests couldn't resist looking down, their gasps confirming the explicit nature of the images. Janine, please, Robert had reached. His wife sighed, attempting to guide her toward the exit. Think of the children. I am thinking of the children, she snapped. I'm thinking of how to explain to our 10-year-old son why his father won't be living with us anymore. I'm thinking of how to tell our daughter why we won't be at Daddy's partnership celebration. Oh yes, I think that vote might be postponed. Indefinitely now. She turned to address the stunned crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the interruption. By all means, continue supporting children's literacy. It's an important cause, even if some of tonight's organizers lack a moral compass. With that parting shot, she turned and strode toward the exit, her dignity remarkably intact despite the public nature of her revelation. Robert hesitated only briefly before following her, casting one agonized glance back at Rachel before disappearing. Into the lobby, the silence that followed lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt much longer, before the ballroom erupted into whispers and hurried conversations. Several attendees who had been standing near the scattered photographs discreetly moved away, while others bent to collect them, more from prurient curiosity than any desire to help. Rachel stood frozen, her professional triumph transformed into public humiliation in the space of minutes. Around us, I could see phones emerging from pockets and clutches, the modern instinct to document scandal overriding any sense of propriety. Rachel, I said quietly, we should go. She turned to me, seeming to remember my presence with a start. Daniel, I can explain, not here. I interrupted, guiding her gently but firmly toward a side exit. Your career depends on handling this correctly. This appeal to her professional instincts succeeded where emotional pleas might have failed. She allowed me to lead her from the ballroom, through service corridors, and eventually to the hotel's side entrance where I discreetly requested our car from the valet. The ride home was conducted in complete silence. Rachel stared out the window, occasionally wiping tears from her cheeks, while I focused on navigating the city streets with careful precision. It wasn't until we entered our house that she finally spoke. Daniel, she began, her voice raw and unfamiliar. What you saw tonight was the end of your affair with Robert Peterson. I finished for her, my voice calm and devoid of the rage that had driven me for months. Or at least, the end of its secrecy. She froze, her coat half removed. You knew? Yes, Rachel. I've known for months. How long? She whispered. Long enough to gather extensive evidence. Long enough to consult an attorney. Long enough to accept that our marriage is over. You sent those pictures to Janine. It wasn't a question. I sent her the truth, I replied. Something you denied me for months. Rachel sank onto the bench in our entryway, her gala gown pooling around her like spilled ink. Why like this? Why not confront me privately? The question was so steeped in self-absorption that I almost laughed. You're asking why I didn't protect you from the consequences of your actions? Why I didn't ensure your affair remained consequence-free? No, she faltered. I just don't understand why you would choose such a public exposure. I didn't create the spectacle, Rachel. Janine Peterson did. I simply provided her with information she deserved to have. Rachel looked up, her makeup streaked by tears. What happens now? Now, I said calmly. You pack an overnight bag and stay somewhere else. Tomorrow, you'll be contacted by my attorney. You're just throwing me out? After 15 years? You threw us out. I corrected her. Every time you lied. Every time you met him. Every time you laughed about my ignorance. Her head snapped up. What are you talking about? Room service at the Four Seasons, Rachel? Seriously? You put it on our joint credit card. That's not what I meant. Or perhaps you meant the Audi R8 dashboard recording? Daniel wouldn't notice if I had an affair with his brother. That was particularly illuminating. The color drained from her face as she realized the extent of my knowledge. You had me followed. I had my suspicions confirmed. I clarified, which turned out to be entirely justified. She stood slowly, the fight seeming to drain from her. I'll go to Melissa's for tonight. We can talk tomorrow when we're both calmer. We can talk through our attorneys, I replied. And Melissa might not be as welcoming as you expect. The circles you've been moving in lately are about to contract. Significantly. As predicted, Rachel's social destruction extended far beyond the spectacular scene at the charity gala. By the following morning, every major gossiping outlet in Chicago was running versions of the story. PR executives' affair exposed at charity gala. Literacy event turns dramatic as spouse confronts cheaters. Several guests had indeed recorded portions of Janine's confrontation, and while the more reputable news outlets refrained from publishing these videos, they circulated widely on social media platforms. Within 48 hours, Rachel's name was synonymous with scandal in Chicago's professional circles. Prescott and Bailey, a firm that specialized in crisis management for others, found themselves in the uncomfortable position of managing their own PR disaster. 3 days after the gala, they announced that Rachel would be taking a leave of absence to address personal matters. The carefully worded statement made no explicit reference to the scandal, but fooled no one that Robert Peterson faced even more immediate consequences. His law firm, built on a reputation of discretion and ethical conduct, placed him on administrative leave pending an internal review. The partnership vote was indeed postponed indefinitely, as Janine had predicted. Their firm released a terse statement affirming their commitment to the highest standards of professional and personal conduct. I had not planned the next phase of social destruction. It unfolded organically through the natural consequences of exposed deception. Mutual friends, forced to choose sides, largely distanced themselves from Rachel. Some did so from moral objection to her affair, others from the more pragmatic desire to avoid association with scandal. Rachel attempted to control the narrative, reaching out to friends with her version of events, claims that our marriage had been troubled for years, that she and Robert had found unexpected love, that I had orchestrated her public humiliation out of vindictiveness. These efforts largely failed, undermined by the evidence I had methodically shared with key individuals in our social circle. She tried to tell me you'd been emotionally absent for years. Our friend Thomas confided when we met for drinks 2 weeks after the gala. But we've all seen you at events alone for months while she was working. We're not idiots, Dan. Melissa, Rachel's closest friend and her refuge on the night of the gala, had been particularly devastated by the revelations. She used me, she told me during a difficult phone conversation. All those times I covered for her, thinking she was dealing with work emergencies. I told my husband he should be more understanding, like you were. Do you know how stupid I feel? Now, even Rachel's professional contacts began to distance themselves. Senior executives who had once sought her PR expertise now worried about association with someone whose judgment had proved so catastrophically flawed. Clients quietly requested different account managers. Invitations to industry events stopped arriving. Robert Peterson was not faring any better. His wife filed for divorce within a week of the gala, retaining one of Chicago's most aggressive divorce attorneys. His children were kept from him initially, with supervised visitation implemented. After intervention from his attorney, the partners at his firm, concerned about their reputation and the potential loss of conservative clients, began internal discussions about his future with the practice. The social destruction I had initiated with a single information package continued to expand through natural consequences. the ripples affecting every aspect of Rachel's and Robert's lives. Their affair, once conducted in exclusive hotel rooms and intimate restaurants, was now dissected in boardrooms, discussed in country club locker rooms, and whispered about at school pickup lines that I took no active role in spreading the scandal. After my initial move, I didn't need to. The truth, once exposed, had its own momentum. The same social circles that had once celebrated Rachel and Robert now found entertainment in their downfall. The same business associates who had respected them now questioned their judgment in all matters. Throughout this period, I maintained a dignified silence publicly. When asked about the situation by acquaintances, I offered only, "It's a difficult time, and I'm focusing on moving forward." This restraint enhanced my standing in our shared social circles, while Rachel's desperate attempts to justify her actions only accelerated her isolation. 6 weeks after the gala, Rachel requested a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park, far from our usual haunts. She arrived looking noticeably thinner, the confident PR executive replaced by a woman visibly worn down by scandal and rejection. "I've been staying with my sister in Evanston," she said after ordering only black coffee. "I can't even go to my favorite restaurants anymore. People stare. Waiters who used to know my name suddenly can't find me a table." I nodded but offered no sympathy. "Robert and I are no longer seeing each other," she continued when I didn't respond. "His wife's family threatened to use their banking connections to have him blacklisted at every major firm in the Midwest if he continued the relationship." "And your feelings for him?" I asked, more from curiosity than emotional investment. She laughed bitterly. "Turns out passion cools considerably when both people lose their incomes and social standing. He blames me for being indiscreet, as though I orchestrated Janine's appearance at the gala. Actions have consequences," I observed. "Something PR professionals usually understand better than most. Is that what this is to you? A lesson in consequences?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "This is the natural outcome of choices you made, Rachel. For months, you lied, deceived, and betrayed not just me, but everyone who trusted you. Did you expect that would remain consequence-free indefinitely? I expected my husband would confront me directly rather than engineering my public humiliation," she hissed. "The way you directly told me about your affair? The way you showed me the respect of honesty." I kept my voice calm, refusing to match her emotional intensity. "You had countless opportunities to end our marriage honorably. You chose deception instead." She looked away, blinking back tears. "Prescott and Bailey has asked for my resignation. Apparently, having their head of nonprofit PR exposed as an adulteress at a charity event creates insurmountable credibility issues." "That seems logical," I agreed. "Is this what you wanted? To destroy everything I've worked for?" I considered the question carefully before answering. What I wanted was the marriage I thought we had. What I expected was honesty from my wife. When those proved impossible, what I wanted was justice. Not revenge, but natural consequences proportionate to the deception. "There's nothing natural about this," she protested. "You calculated everything, orchestrated the perfect destruction of my life." I revealed the truth, Rachel. That's all. If the truth destroys your life, perhaps the problem lies in how you were living it. She had no response to that, and we sat in silence for several minutes before she gathered her purse and stood. "My attorney will contact yours regarding the division of assets. They've already been in touch," I informed her. "I think you'll find the preliminary discussions enlightening." As she turned to leave, I added, "A word of advice, Rachel. The social damage is already done. Fighting me on the financial settlement will only prolong your public exposure. A quick, quiet divorce would be in your best interest now." She paused, then nodded once before walking away. It was the last private conversation we would have outside of formal legal proceedings. The social destruction was complete. Rachel and Robert had lost their professional standing, their social position, and their respective partners' trust. It had cost me a single package of evidence and the patience to let natural consequences unfold. Now it was time for the final phase of my plan, securing not just social but financial justice through the legal system that had been designed, ironically enough, by men very much like Robert Peterson. The legal battle I had anticipated never materialized. Instead, what unfolded was a methodical dismantling of Rachel's position through superior preparation, overwhelming evidence, and strategic timing. Our first court appearance was scheduled for a preliminary hearing 3 months after the charity gala incident. By then, Rachel had secured legal representation, not one of Chicago's top divorce attorneys, who were all conflicted out due to my earlier consultations, but a competent mid-tier lawyer named Stephanie Winters from a respectable firm. Carolyn Berger, my attorney, had prepared extensively for this initial confrontation. Walking into the courtroom, she carried a leather briefcase containing organized binders of evidence, financial records, surveillance reports, witness statements, and a comprehensive property inventory. Rachel and her attorney arrived moments before the hearing began. I noticed immediately how different Rachel looked. Her designer wardrobe replaced by a conservative navy suit that seemed slightly too large for her frame, her confident posture diminished. The scandal and its aftermath had clearly taken a toll. The hearing itself was brief and procedural. Judge Margaret Wilson, a no-nonsense jurist with 20 years on the bench and a reputation for fairness tempered with impatience for dramatics, established the framework for our divorce proceedings. Temporary orders were issued regarding access to joint accounts and the marital home, which I continued to occupy while Rachel stayed with her sister. It was after this initial hearing, in a conference room down the hall from the courtroom, that the real negotiation began. Carolyn presented Rachel's attorney with our proposed settlement terms that were far from generous but stopped short of punitive. "My client is prepared to be reasonable," Carolyn explained, her tone professional but with a subtle undercurrent of authority. "But we've documented extensive use of marital assets to finance Mrs. Morgan's extramarital affair, which will certainly influence the court's view of an equitable distribution." Stephanie Winters reviewed the summary document with a deepening frown. "This proposal gives Mr. Morgan approximately 70% of the marital assets. That's hardly equitable under Illinois law. Perhaps you should review the supporting evidence," Carolyn suggested, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "It includes Mrs. Morgan's credit card statements showing hotel charges, expensive gifts, and meals with Mr. Peterson totaling over $42,000 of marital funds over 8 months. It also includes records of her using her business expense account fraudulently to conceal affair-related costs, which could potentially have professional licensing implications." Rachel's face paled visibly. "Those were legitimate business expenses," she protested weakly. "The Four Seasons doesn't typically provide business receipts with room service charges for 2 at midnight," I pointed out quietly. "Nor do they include champagne and strawberries as standard conference amenities." Rachel's attorney placed a warning hand on her arm. "We'll need time to review these materials before discussing settlement terms further." "Of course," Carolyn agreed smoothly. "However, I should mention that our proposal includes a confidentiality agreement. If we can't reach an acceptable settlement, and this proceeds to trial, all evidence will become part of the public record." The implied threat was clear. While the affair itself was already public knowledge, the explicit details contained in our evidence, text messages, hotel receipts, surveillance photographs, would create a new round of humiliation if aired in open court. "We'll be in touch within the week," Stephanie promised. Gathering her materials with evident concern as Rachel and her attorney left the conference room, Carolyn turned to me with a slight smile. "They'll take the deal. She can't afford another public spectacle, and her attorney knows it." Carolyn was correct. 3 days later, Stephanie Winters called to schedule a settlement conference. "My client is interested in resolving this matter expeditiously," she explained, professional language barely concealing Rachel's desperation. To end the process, the settlement conference took place in Carolyn's office downtown. Rachel arrived with her attorney in a noticeably subdued demeanor. The confident, dynamic woman I had married was now almost unrecognizable, her usual meticulous appearance replaced by minimal makeup and a simple blouse and slacks that suggested. Her designer wardrobe had been one of the first casualties of her reduced circumstances. Carolyn led the discussion with precision, addressing each element of the proposed settlement. "Mr. Morgan will retain ownership of the marital home on Maple Avenue. Mrs. Morgan will quitclaim her interest in exchange for a cash payment of $125,000, representing approximately 1/4 of the equity. Mrs. Morgan's retirement accounts will remain solely her property. Mr. Morgan's retirement accounts," being substantially larger, will remain solely his property. The investment portfolio will be divided, with 75% retained by Mr. Morgan and 25% transferred to Mrs. Morgan. Personal property has been inventoried and valued. Mrs. Morgan may select items totaling up to 30% of the appraised value, excluding specific family heirlooms belonging to the Morgan family. Each party will retain their respective vehicles. Mr. Morgan will assume the remaining lease payments on Mrs. Morgan's vehicle until the lease terminates in 8 months. Neither party will pay or receive spousal maintenance. Stephanie Winters raised objections to several points, particularly the inequitable division of the investment portfolio and home equity. Carolyn countered each objection with references to specific evidence of marital funds used to finance the affair. Additionally, Carolyn noted, Mrs. Morgan's current employment situation is unstable due to her own actions, not due to any behavior of my client. The law doesn't require Mr. Morgan to financially insulate her from the professional consequences of her choices. Throughout this exchange, Rachel remained largely silent, occasionally whispering to her attorney, but otherwise showing little fight. The fire and determination that had characterized her professional rise had been extinguished by the combination of public scandal and private betrayal. After 2 hours of negotiation, with only minor adjustments to the original proposal, the settlement agreement was finalized. Rachel would receive approximately 30% of our marital assets, not the 50% typically awarded in Illinois divorces without fault considerations, but enough to provide a financial foundation for her new life. As the documents were being prepared for signature, Rachel finally addressed me directly. Was it worth it, Daniel? Destroying everything we built together? I considered her question carefully before answering. I didn't destroy anything, Rachel. I simply refused to pretend our marriage was something it wasn't. You had already destroyed it long before I found out. And now you're taking almost everything, she said bitterly. I'm taking what's fair considering the circumstances. I corrected her, which is still less than what I contributed to our marital assets. Your career flourished during our marriage partly because I supported you in every way, emotionally, practically, financially. You repaid that by using our joint resources to conduct an affair and plan an exit that would have left me blindsided and disadvantaged. She had no response to this assessment, and we completed the signing process in silence. When the final document had been notarized, Rachel stood abruptly. Is there anything else? She asked Stephanie, deliberately avoiding my gaze. No, we're finished here, her attorney confirmed. The judge will review the agreement at the final hearing next month, but it's essentially done. Rachel nodded once and left without another word to me. It was the last time I would see her until our final court appearance. The divorce was finalized. On a Tuesday morning in late September, almost exactly 8 months after I had first discovered Rachel's infidelity. The courtroom was nearly empty. No friends or family. No spectators drawn by lingering scandal. Just 2 people legally ending 15 years of shared history with the stroke of a judge's pen. Judge Wilson reviewed our settlement agreement, asked perfunctory questions to ensure both parties understood the terms, and then granted the dissolution of our marriage. The entire proceeding took less than 20 minutes. Outside the courtroom, Rachel paused as if to say something, then apparently thought better of it. She walked away down the marble hallway, the sound of her heels echoing off the walls, a diminishing rhythm that marked the final moments of our life together. Carolyn shook my hand as we parted at the courthouse steps. Congratulations, Daniel. You've secured an excellent outcome under difficult circumstances. Thank you for your guidance, I replied sincerely. I couldn't have navigated this without you. Most clients let emotion override strategy, she observed. You never did. That made all the difference. As I walked to my car, I reflected on her assessment. Had I truly remained strategic rather than emotional? Or had I simply channeled my emotions, the pain, rage, and betrayal, into a more productive form? The distinction seemed academic now that the process was complete. The legal victory was unequivocal. I had retained the majority of our marital assets, including our home, my business interests, and most of our investments. More importantly, I had achieved this outcome without protracted legal battles or further public spectacle. The divorce was handled efficiently, decisively, and on my terms. Robert Peterson had fared significantly worse in his divorce proceedings. Janine's family connections and resources had secured her not only the majority of their considerable assets, but primary custody of their children. The prenuptial agreement with its fidelity clause had indeed been enforced, leaving Robert with little beyond his personal property and a severely damaged professional reputation. His law firm, after months of administrative review, had asked for his resignation. The partnership track he had been pursuing for years evaporated overnight. According to mutual connections, he had taken a position at a much smaller firm in the suburbs, handling routine corporate matters for a fraction of his previous salary. The legal system, which both Rachel and Robert had believed they could manipulate to their advantage when the time came to discard their respective spouses, had instead become the instrument of justice. Not through vindictive litigation, but through the methodical application of evidence, strategic timing, and calm resolve. I drove home from the courthouse to the house that was now solely mine. I felt not the triumph I had once anticipated, but a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. The legal victory was the final confirmation that my approach had been sound, my strategy effective, and my patience rewarded. The chapter of my life titled Rachel was officially closed. It was time to begin writing the next one. 2 years have passed since my divorce was finalized. The house on Maple Avenue still stands as a testament to financial success, but the interior has been transformed. Gone are Rachel's carefully curated furniture pieces and artwork, replaced with selections that reflect my own taste, more contemporary, less concerned with impressing others, more focused on creating a space of personal comfort. The first 6 months after the divorce were devoted to healing and recalibration. I took a sabbatical from my financial practice, leaving it in the capable hands of my junior partners while I traveled through Europe alone, visiting cities Rachel and I had explored together and creating new memories to overlay the old in Vienna. Sitting in a cafe where we had once planned our future, I realized that the anger that had driven me for so long had finally begun to dissipate. In its place was something more valuable: perspective, wisdom, and a renewed appreciation for authenticity in all relationships. Upon returning to Chicago, I threw myself into rebuilding not just my life, but expanding my business. Morgan Wealth Strategies opened a second office in the North Shore suburbs, targeting a demographic of young tech entrepreneurs who had different financial priorities than my established client base. The expansion has been remarkably successful, increasing our assets under management by nearly 40% in 18 months. My social life, too, has evolved in unexpected ways. The divorce initially created awkward dynamics within our former social circle. Some friends maintained connections with both Rachel and me, carefully avoiding mentioning one to the other. Others chose sides definitively, either rallying around me or disappearing entirely, presumably maintaining loyalty to Rachel rather than fight these natural social realignments. I embraced the opportunity to develop new friendships and deepen those that remained. I joined the board of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, became more active in Northwestern's alumni mentoring program, and started volunteering with a financial literacy initiative for underserved communities. These activities connected me with people outside my previous social ecosystem, people who knew nothing of the scandal or my divorce, who valued me for my current contributions rather than my marital status or dramatic history. One such connection was Elena Vasquez, the symphony's development director. We began working together on fundraising strategies, which evolved into coffee meetings to discuss ideas, then dinners where conversation ranged far beyond orchestral funding. Elena, intelligent, compassionate, and refreshingly direct, became first a friend, then something more. Our relationship developed slowly, with mutual caution born of past experiences. Elena had her own history: a brief marriage in her 20s to a musician who chose his career over their relationship, followed by years focused on professional advancement rather than romantic entanglements. "I'm not interested in being anyone's rebound," she told me during our third dinner together. "And I suspect you're not fully healed yet, regardless of how composed you appear." "You're right," I admitted. "I'm still processing everything that happened. But I enjoy your company, and I'd like to see where this might lead, at whatever pace feels right." That honesty established the foundation for our relationship, a foundation of transparency and respect entirely different from the facade my marriage had eventually become. We've been dating for 14 months now, taking deliberate steps forward after careful consideration rather than rushing toward artificial milestones. Elena knows the full story of my marriage and divorce. I shared it not as a dramatic revelation, but as an important chapter in my history that shaped who I am today. Her response was characteristically thoughtful. "Everyone has a past," she said after I finished the account. "What matters is what you learned from it and how you carry those lessons forward." As for Rachel, her life took a trajectory I neither celebrated nor mourned. After 6 months of unsuccessfully seeking comparable employment in Chicago, she relocated to Phoenix, accepting a position at a regional PR firm at a significantly reduced salary. According to mutual acquaintances, she has gradually rebuilt some semblance of a professional reputation, though the scandal continues to appear in search results of her name. Robert Peterson's life imploded more dramatically. The combination of professional disgrace, financial devastation from his divorce, and limited access to his children drove him into a depression that reportedly required medical intervention. He now works at a small suburban practice handling routine legal matters, his dreams of partnership at a prestigious firm permanently shattered. Janine Peterson, interestingly, has thrived in the aftermath. With her family's support, she increased her involvement in philanthropic work, eventually taking a leadership role in the Caldwell Foundation. She began dating a prominent Chicago surgeon about a year after her divorce, and according to recent announcements, they are now engaged. The children, from what I've heard, have adjusted as well as can be expected. They remain primarily with their mother, seeing Robert on a limited visitation schedule that has gradually become less restrictive as he demonstrated stability and commitment. Sometimes people ask if I regret the approach I took, if a less calculated response might have preserved some possibility of reconciliation or at least ended our marriage. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.